What's good? It's Woog. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. We've got Dustin Poirier, 27 wins, 6 losses, and 1 no contest, taking on Conor McGregor, 22 wins and 5 losses. For the third time, this is the trilogy bout between the two. Conor McGregor won the first one via TKO in the first round, and then Dustin Poirier won the rematch just this past January via second round TKO. And although this is the fight that's taking place, Dustin Poirier should be, by all measures, the champion of this division. I mean, with the absence of Khabib, we're letting the dust settle now because Khabib beat Dustin Poirier, Conor McGregor, Justin Gaethje before retiring. Well, in the wake of all that, Dustin Poirier stopped Conor McGregor in that January rematch, and instead of then either receiving the title right there in, again, Khabib's absence, basically a vacant title, instead of getting that, or instead of being scheduled to then fight for the 155-pound lightweight title that Khabib vacated, Charles Oliveira fights Michael Chandler for that belt, while Dustin Poirier pursues this trilogy rematch with Conor McGregor. So, although Charles Oliveira beat Michael Chandler for the official title, kind of feels like Dustin Poirier is essentially the uncrowned champion of the division. And that's taking nothing away from Charles Oliveira, who's been on a pretty amazing run himself. But it's Dustin Poirier who, since losing to Michael Johnson, has beaten Jim Miller, fought that draw with Eddie Alvarez, and then went on to win his next 6 out of 7 fights, with the only loss being in that title challenge versus Khabib Nurmagomedov. So Dustin Poirier is about as vetted and accomplished as they come at lightweight right now. Now, Conor McGregor, on the other hand, former featherweight champ when he shocked the world by knocking out Jose Aldo after his rapid ascension. Look, I didn't think he was going to do that to Jose Aldo. I thought it might be interesting. Conor McGregor was out obviously looking tremendous against like Chad Mendes, Dennis Seaver, and Dustin Poirier just before that, again, in their first fight. So, after that spectacular first round one-punch knockout of longtime featherweight champ Jose Aldo, Conor McGregor's just launched into stardom. And then he has those back-to-back fights with Nate Diaz, where he was actually supposed to fight RDA, Dos Anjos. They needed a late replacement. Nate Diaz stepped in, but under the condition that this was going to be fought at 170, not 155. So you basically had the new featherweight champ, Conor McGregor, skipping 155 and fighting all the way up at 170. Now, granted, Nate Diaz isn't a true 170 guy himself. He just didn't have all the time in the world to cut weight back down to 155. But damn, Conor McGregor fighting Nate at 170? Yeah, he came up short, got stopped in the second round. By far the biggest win of Nate Diaz's career. They then rematch at the same weight. They still don't bring it back down to 155. And that rematch between Conor and Nate Diaz, pretty much an instant classic. It was anybody's guess who won that fight on the scorecards. Conor McGregor was awarded a majority decision win, and then he goes back down to 155. Now keep in mind, Conor McGregor never defended the 145-pound title after defeating Jose Aldo. He would never return to that division. But after those 2 Nate Diaz fights, he comes back and fights Eddie Alvarez, wins the title at Madison Square Garden, and he's just as big a star as the UFC has ever seen. And that's why the stars aligned for him to have that crossover super fight with Floyd Money Mayweather, who had just retired after his 49-0 career. And then they have that boxing fight. Conor McGregor loses the fight, but he gets paid so much money relative to what he was making prior that, I remember sitting and watching the fight and my dad saying the night of the fight, Conor McGregor's never going to be the same as a mixed martial artist because, in the marvelous Marvin Hagler, the late Marvin Hagler, longtime middleweight boxing champ throughout the 80s, I think his quote was something like, "It's hard to stay hungry when you're waking up in silk pajamas." So Conor McGregor saw all the success you could see in mixed martial arts, then has this super mega crossover fight with Floyd Mayweather, and then it's like, how can you then get back into that savage mode in the same mindset that you were in prior when you were, working up the ranks, trying to become something from nothing, to where nobody was going to stop you from working out, let alone you having to re-motivate yourself and to find the vigor to go back and work out in the same way. How do you recapture all of those ingredients that made for that winning recipe to deliver some of the greatest performances that we've ever seen, like that knockout of Jose Aldo? How do you regain the stomach that will help you to persevere through like the really tough times in the cage? I mean, in that rematch with Nate Diaz, everything was on the line. Because if you lose back-to-back against Diaz, the whole Conor McGregor party is over, right? So for him to, again, it was a close decision, but the way that he fought that rematch just showed you that he was willing to put everything on the line and give it everything he had so that history wouldn't repeat itself in Nate Diaz stopping him. Well, after that Floyd Mayweather-Conor McGregor fight, he then comes back to challenge Khabib Nurmagomedov for the lightweight 155-pound title, and that's where he was famously submitted in the 4th round, where Khabib then hops the cage and attacks Conor's posse, and all hell breaks loose. That was a very dramatic scene, especially when you factor in all of the trash talk in the build-up leading to the fight. So for context, he had knocked Jose Aldo out in 2015, fought the first Nate Diaz fight in 2016. The rematch was later in 2016. Then he has the 155-pound title win over Eddie Alvarez, one of the greatest performances of his career. Nobody made Eddie Alvarez look that bad. Look at how easy Conor McGregor makes outclassing and then stopping Eddie Alvarez look in that fight. That was even later in the same year, 2016. So he has both of those Nate Diaz fights and the Eddie Alvarez fight in 2016. Hell of a year. Then he has the Floyd Mayweather fight in 2017, comes back for the title challenge against Khabib in 2018, which he loses again via submission. And then he comes back about a year and some change later to just obliterate, just steamroll Donald Cowboy Cerrone in January of 2020, just a couple months before the pandemic. Conor McGregor, around the time of that Cowboy fight, he was saying he had big plans for 2020. He wanted to fight like 3-4 times that year. Well, he wouldn't fight again that year, but instead would fight Dustin Poirier in January of 2021, 1 year removed from that Cowboy Cerrone fight, which again was over a year removed from the Khabib fight prior to that. So you're starting to see these gaps in activity for Conor McGregor. And then in that Dustin Poirier fight, January 2021, he gets stopped. And now everybody who was, wondering where Conor McGregor, basically the narrative on Conor and where he stood as a elite mixed martial artist changed that day. And now just about everybody's looking at Conor's career side-eyed like, damn, is it really a wrap for this guy at an elite level? Some already believe yes. Some think that he still has something in him. It's really a polarizing topic, but with that Poirier versus Conor McGregor 2 fight, more of the questions seem to be answered in terms of, is Conor McGregor still today what he was? And I think that the answer to that is no. But then the question is, how close is he to being what he was today in 2021? And boy, it could be a very simple yes and no answer to that question, or it could be a pretty complicated thing. And that complication lies in how much Dustin Poirier improved from the first time he fought Conor McGregor in 2014 to now in 2021. Because whereas Conor had that quick ascension and then that apparent flame out where, again, since that Eddie Alvarez win in 2016, he is 1-2 as a mixed martial artist in like the past 5 years. 1-2 in the past 5 years. That's excluding the Floyd Mayweather fight. And granted, those 2 losses were against, Khabib Nurmagomedov, probably the greatest in the lightweight 155-pound division in the sport's history, and Dustin Poirier, who we don't know if we've even seen his ceiling because of how much of a run he's been on since, his last loss, which was against Michael Johnson via KO. This was in 2016. But yeah, since that, the turning point for me was seeing him stop Anthony Showtime Pettis, the former lightweight champ, because he put a beating on Showtime Pettis to where you're looking at Dustin Poirier like, damn, okay, Dustin. And then you see him fight that, to me, a classic versus Justin Gaethje, one of the most brutal fights you'll ever witness. Look at the back and forth in that one. Please pull up Poirier versus Gaethje. Poirier stops Gaethje in the 4th round, and then Justin would obviously go on to have that tremendous run of his own that culminated in his unsuccessful title challenge against Khabib. Nobody beat Khabib. But yeah, that Poirier versus Justin Gaethje 2018 fight was then followed up with a win in the rematch against Eddie Alvarez. Remember, they had the no contest. I might have said draw, but it was a no contest back in 2017. Poirier stops Eddie Alvarez in 2018, then beats Max Holloway. Max Holloway dared to be great, jumped up a division. Max was a longtime featherweight champ. Well, kind of long. It actually wasn't that long of a title reign for Max, but the great Max Holloway then went up, unsuccessfully tested Dustin Poirier. Poirier won that via competitive but clear decision, and then he loses via submission to Khabib Nurmagomedov, comes back to beat Dan Hooker in another sensational fight, another brutal fight. It wasn't as bad, I don't think, as the Poirier versus Justin Gaethje fight, but it was a super rough one. One of the fights of the year. Look that one up as well. Dustin Poirier versus Dan Hooker. Poirier wins that via another competitive, even more competitive than the Max Holloway fight. Dan Hooker really tested him. Poirier comes out on top, and then he has that TKO win over Conor McGregor. And on this road for Dustin, you see him start picking up different things along the way. Like, you see how much his mettle and fortitude have been tested over the years and how he's overcome such adversity in the cage. To where, when you look at that Dustin Poirier versus Conor McGregor rematch, I mean, there's so many things to consider. Aside from the tactical chess match, you wonder how much Conor has had to endure and overcome in the cage in recent years since, again, that huge fluffy payday versus Floyd, where if you look at the timelines, in the span that Conor had, only 2 fights against Khabib and against Donald Cowboy Cerrone. This is basically from 2017 to the time he fought Dustin the second time in 2021. Only 2 fights in almost 4 years for Conor McGregor. Meanwhile, in that same span, Dustin Poirier had 6 fights. 6 fights to 2 fights. So I just feel like Dustin Poirier has just been more in rhythm, has just been more dedicated to fighting, to training, to testing himself, to challenging himself. And Conor has kind of been a part-time fighter and a full-time businessman, part-time troublemaker as well. But they just haven't been, living the same lifestyle. And granted, Dustin Poirier also has a family and, spends a lot of time with them. But he's just been more dug in. And you look at his fight schedule, it's been much more consistent. So what could have changed between the rematch and this third trilogy fight? Well, when something happens like a dramatic TKO, like the one that Dustin scored over Conor, people's memories of the fight can, change a little bit, where they forget how competitive that first round was. I mean, this first round was exhilarating. You saw counter punches, leg kicks, trading leg kicks, both of them catching each other with feints and then left hands and then right hands. That check hook that Dustin Poirier was throwing at the end of combinations was brilliant, and he would point to Conor every time he would clock him with it. And Conor McGregor, for as much of a left-hand reputation he has, he's got a very underrated right hand that he lit Dustin Poirier up with a couple times, had Poirier rocked with the right hand, let alone the left hand. So you really have to re-examine some of these tools. And if you look back, obviously, further in Conor McGregor's career, he was using a lot more kicks and was a lot more of a mixed martial artist. I feel like in recent years, and this is pretty well documented, he has become more boxing-centric or boxing-reliant. He's always been pretty boxing-centric, but he's become more boxing-reliant in recent years. And this is someone who's, was recently negotiating or at least entertaining a potential fight with Manny Pacquiao. So you really don't know where Conor's head is in terms of how committed and devoted he is to mixed martial arts fighting. I mean, he's, again, just hopped so many tax brackets to where can you ever really return to that? And, maybe if he loses this third fight against Dustin and he admits, yeah, the jig is up. I just didn't have it in me ever since, or, for the past couple years. But yeah, rewatch Dustin versus Conor 2 and you will see that this was a very competitive first round. And yes, the calf kicks were a huge problem for Conor McGregor. Can he change his stance up between that fight and this fight? He might have to a little bit. I mean, he was trying to do something. The first leg kick that Dustin Poirier threw, Conor McGregor did pull his leg back. So he was cognizant of these, but he didn't know, I don't think he knew how big an ingredient this was going to be for Dustin Poirier. Well, now he knows. But make no mistake, he hurt Poirier a lot in that first round. And so going into this third fight, what do I think is going to take place? I feel like the narrative is, and Khabib said this, if Conor's going to win, it's got to be in the first round. If it goes beyond one, then it's all Dustin. Well, I think that's, more or less a fair assessment. And I mean, who better to speak on this than somebody who, whooped them both. But, Conor McGregor isn't doing any media this time around. And, I don't think that's a great thing. I get why he's doing it. He's in Ireland. It's a lot of logistics to get him over here to do, a lot of press related things. And he'd rather be just training the way that he wants to train, needs to train. But in terms of what the theatrics and showmanship and just over the top behavior, what it seems to actually do for Conor in a good way as it pertains to these fights, the absence of that, I think is relevant. I think it matters. I mean, what is this, hermetic, monk-like Conor McGregor state going to really yield? I mean, he kind of more or less did that leading into the Donald Cerrone fight in January of 2020. But I just feel like the whole shtick is a part of the magic that takes place with Conor McGregor performances. So he knows that adjustments need to be made. I don't know what he's telling himself in his head. I don't know if he has recreated the self-belief that I am the man. I don't know if he is truly at his core back in that place in the way that he was in 2015, 16, 17, and so forth. Now, Dustin Poirier has to be brimming with confidence after his last performance. Did he catch lightning in a bottle? Was it just the perfect alignment in his win over Conor that second time? No, I think that there were some foundational things that gave him the edge there. Are those things going to still exist in this trilogy? Some of them will. His improved counterpunching, punch resistance. Conor can catch and hurt anybody. And I think he's going to catch Poirier. Is he going to stop Poirier in the first round? He might, and it would be a very on-brand Conor McGregor thing for that to happen, where it's like, how the hell did he pull another rabbit out of his hat? You cannot discount that. I don't care what happened in the second fight. Conor McGregor can stop Dustin Poirier in this third fight. Can he change the overall trajectory of his output historically throughout a 5-round fight? Like, can he turn it up in the 4th round and finish strong in the 5th? No, I don't think he's going to recreate the wheel and all of a sudden just give us a totally new Conor McGregor. I think at 32 years old, what you've got is what you've got, more or less. You can improve on some things, but your foundational skills are more or less going to be the same. Even though, we see 31-year-old Dustin Poirier just continue to improve his game. Poirier is now 32, not 31. But I think that the first round is going to be I think there are going to be some explosive moments. I think it's going to be measured. I think Poirier is going to want to get to work early, want to get Conor's respect early. Not that he doesn't have it already, but he's also going to be very cognizant in respecting Conor McGregor's power, especially in that first round. It's just going to be so intense when they exchange 2 to 3 punch combinations, because either one can hurt the other. You know, the finishing sequence was that leg kick followed by, I believe, a straight left, because this is southpaw versus southpaw, a straight left that caught Conor McGregor and then kind of buckled him after, again, a calf kick, because he being Conor started trying to catch Poirier's leg kicks, and then he would, not really know what to do with the other hand. Sometimes he kind of hit him. Other times he would just release the leg. But Conor did not like getting kicked to the leg here, so he's going to be very sensitive to that. And I think that sensitivity, which, by the way, Poirier also took Conor down in the first round, pretty early in the first round. I think that might be forgotten as well. He kind of wore out his gas tank a little bit by taking him down. Conor McGregor worked his way back up, but then they were in the clinch for like the next 2 minutes of the round, where that's exhausting your gas tank. I think Poirier is going to have to find something similar to at least get Conor out of being 100% fresh, 90% fresh. You get me? Now, will that come in the form of a takedown, a clinch? It's going to be something like that while he's mixing in the stand-up. It's a lot that Conor's going to have to be cognizant of, whereas Poirier more or less knows what he needs to be cognizant of when it comes to Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor's going to have more to worry about, I think, than Poirier in terms of the variety of things to worry about. And I think that those different things that Conor has to worry about are going to get Poirier out of the first round. Again, Conor's got a puncher's chance to end this in the first round. But it's more likely, I believe, that this gets out of the first round and that eventually, whether it's the second or third round, you will get a fatiguing and discouraged and, dare I say, broken Conor McGregor in this trilogy fight, where, a part of me wants to say Conor McGregor by first round knockout, just because of the relatively strong possibility of that outcome. But I think that it's more likely that we get another mid-round Dustin Poirier stoppage of Conor McGregor. I know that's kind of the in vogue and easy pick because of what we just saw in the rematch. I just still think that that's more likely to happen than Conor shocking the world once again. But yeah, please let me know what you think in the comments. And if Conor wins, first of all, the sky's the limit. He could get a title shot for all I know, right? Because that will be him beating Dustin 2 out of 3 times. He doesn't owe Dustin a 4th fight after that. Conor McGregor can once again call his shot because he is Conor McGregor. Now, if he loses, where does Conor McGregor go from there? Is it a trilogy fight with Nate Diaz? I mean, it's slimmer pickings, and depending on how Conor gets stopped, if this fight doesn't go the distance, because that would be something, right? If this ends up being like Conor McGregor versus Nate Diaz 2, it's, again, another possibility. I just think it's more likely that Dustin Poirier, again, gets a mid-round stoppage just because he is continuing to hit you, and we have seen, it's not that Conor doesn't have endurance. It's not that he doesn't have a well-rounded game. I think he does have a well-rounded game. His takedown defense is underrated. His ability to take a punch is pretty good. I just think that we've seen a pattern of when things start going bad for Conor, they unravel quickly. Whether you're talking about the Floyd Mayweather fight, the first Nate Diaz fight, the Dustin Poirier fight, or when he started to really wilt against Khabib. Now, he did get stopped in the 4th against Khabib, not in the 2nd, even though Khabib was really putting it on him in that 2nd round. Conor has now shown a pattern of fading quickly when things really do get bad. So I can't see him really start getting pieced up in the 2nd and 3rd round and not wilting to somebody who's as gritty and durable as Dustin Poirier. At least in recent years, Khabib fight notwithstanding. Yes, he did get knocked out back in 2016 and back in 2014 to Michael Johnson and Conor McGregor, but I really do think that this is kind of a different Dustin Poirier. So if Conor has to be confronted with that 2nd to 3rd round against Dustin Poirier's circumstance again, I just don't know if he's got enough in him to pull it off. And so I think, again, the more likely outcome, Dustin Poirier, I'll say, instead of a second round TKO, how about we go third round this time? But yeah, please let me know what you think in the comments. Who are you going with and how? And I asked you about the different going forward scenarios. What about Dustin Poirier? Like, if he wins this, you would think that this has got to be a title shot with him against Charles Oliveira, right? By the way, why are they doing Justin Gaethje so dirty? Like, his only loss, besides that Poirier loss a few years ago, was against Khabib Nurmagomedov. He's been on ice since that Khabib loss. I felt like he was more deserving of a title shot than, say, Michael Chandler. But yeah, please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.